Hi, and welcome to the Bookkeepers Podcast. I'm Zoe Whitman. I'm here with Jo Wood, and we're joined by Paul Dunn today from B1G1. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hi, guys. I've got to say that that starting music, I'm not sure whether everybody heard it, but I was really tapping my feet. That's an awesome, awesome introduction. So yeah, I was here, or I am here in Singapore, tapping my feet and feeling very, very privileged to be with you two, and of course your members from around the world. So wherever you are right now, whatever you're doing, thank you so much for being here. Just know that you're in the right place.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us. So for people that don't know who Paul Dunn is and what B1G1 is, would you like to give us a bit of an introduction?
Oh, well, of course, Paul Dunn has been around for a fair few years, so I could spend the whole 60 minutes and cover the first 30 years of my life. So, yes, but before I do that, I just want to say something else, which is I told you, I think before we clicked it on, that I was very privileged to be with you, and I am. And I want to explain why that is. When people look at my history, and it's kind of interesting, you know, I was born in Dover, I got headhunted. I went and studied in London, got headhunted when I was 21, 6 years ago. And and I became one of the first, this is how long ago this is, I became one of the first 10 in Hewlett Packard in Australia. That's way back before you were born. And so I've always had this kind of techie thing going on and stuff. Then I left HP, formed actually one of Australia's first computer companies. Do you know, someone told me the other day that I'm in the Australian Computer Museum. How about that? And, and then way back in the 80s, actually, I formed a company, and we did something. It was called the Results Corporation, and I was consulting or working with 23,000 small to medium scale businesses and doing a whole lot of marketing and stuff for them. And then I got back to, in a way, my roots, because when I was at HP, I was working with the profession, meaning the accounting profession, overseeing some of HP's computer stuff in that area. And so I went back and I created this thing, which some of the people listening to us now may know. I was at Heathrow Airport the other day, and someone said, "Oh, I remember." So we created this thing called the Accountants Boot Camp, and we had 17,700 people join that program over the years. And then I sold that in the year 2000. And then I was sort of banned from doing things, right, as happens when you sell things, for 3 years. And then I just wanted to get back into speaking. And so I did. And people would ask me, what's the secret to success and all that kind of stuff. And I will tell you what I told them then, but it's different now. What I told them then is, well, there's two things you need to remember. One, you need to give your clients extraordinary value, just extraordinary value for the people that you are privileged to serve. And secondly, you need to have fun doing that. And I know, by the way, the fun thing is part of what you do as well, which is great. But now there's a third thing that I learned, right? And I learned it because of every single one of us has moments, don't we? Moments in life which kind of change the direction of your life. And so I had one in 2007, which gets to the thing about why B1G1 is so important. And by the way, we're so grateful to have you as wonderful members of B1G1. I saw today you've already done some 2,000 impacts or something, which is really, really cool. But anyway, so let me get back to what happened in 2007. And by the way, those of you listening to us now, whether you're driving or whatever, hopefully, whatever you're doing, unlike Zoe, who just spilled a glass of wine, or actually a whole bottle of wine in Mallorca, where she's on holiday. So whatever it is you're doing, seriously, whatever it is you're doing, I'm really hopeful that our time together will, for you, be one of those moments. I'm really hopeful this will happen. Because someone once said to me, Paul, where you're at in life and in your business is really simply a reaction to all of the moments that have happened, your reaction to all of the moments that have happened in your life. So anyway, so in 2007, here's this young lady that I was mentoring. Her name is Masami. She's a young Japanese lady. And this is 2007. And she was in the mentoring room, if you like, with me. And she said in this lovely Japanese accent, can we do different today? And I said, well, sure. What do you have in mind? And she said, well, you're the mentor. I wish I could do her Japanese accent. It's really lovely. But anyway, she said, you're mentor. And so you always ask the question. So today, can I ask you the question? And I said, sure. What do you have in mind? And she said, oh, well, really, it's a what if question. She said, what if we could create a system, a process, whereby every time something good is done in business, something great happens in our world. And at that time, I was what people would have said is an Aussie bloke, because I was living in Australia, as was Masami at that time. So my response to that was a good Aussie bloke response, which was, for those of you or Aussies listening to us now, I hope my accent is okay. So an Aussie bloke would say, oh, wow, that's awesome. That's what they would say, right? So that's what I said. And she was smart enough to say, I don't think you get it yet. And I said, well, help me understand. And she was, I don't want to say she was bedraggled. She wasn't, but it was very, very clear that she had kind of like been somewhere in her head. Does that make sense? She'd been thinking about this for a long time. And so she said, well, I've created this thing. And she said, in my head, I've given it a name. And I said, what is it? Well, when she said I created, she hadn't created, I've been thinking about this thing. And I said, so what's the name of it? And she said, well, it's called Buy One, Give One. And I said, okay, so how would that work? And she said, well, and for those of you in the US, think, what is that big office thing? Gosh, what's it called? Anyway, think office supplies company, think electronics company, think in the UK, think Currys, that sort of thing, right? She didn't use that. She used an Australian version of it. So she said, imagine you go to Harvey Norman, was the name she used. People in Australia will know what that means. And you want to buy a plasma TV. And she said, and you get this TV and I said, whoa, Masami, what did you say it was called again? She said, it's called Buy One, Give One. And I said, Masami, that's a really silly business model, because if I buy that plasma TV, they're not going, irrespective of where it is from, right? I'm not going to buy, they're not going to give me another TV. She said, oh no, you misunderstand. And I said, help me understand that. And she said, well, you want that bigger TV because you want bigger pixels, you want brighter pixels, you want many more of them, and so on. And I said, yeah, that I can get that. So she said, and this was the moment, she said again in this lovely Japanese accent, so when you do that, how would it be if someone who could not see got the gift of sight? And I went, just exactly what you just did then, Zoe. I went, and I was surrounded by books, and she said, oh, author sells book and tree get planted. And I also had a cup of coffee, and she said, oh, every time anyone drinks a cup of coffee, child in need gets access to water. And my response to that was pretty simple. It was, can I be your mentor for the rest of your life? And by the way, at first she said no, but then she changed her mind a little bit after. She showed me a beautiful video, which sadly we don't show to people, a video she made that night. And it's one day when we're going to play that, I'll show it to you. It's amazing. And so getting back to what is it that, remember I said, in order to be successful, you need to give extraordinary value to the people you're serving. You need to have fun doing it. I would now say, and you need to make a difference when it's done. And I like what Steve Jobs said about that. He said in 1996, I've just realized I'm talking too much to you guys.
Not at all. I am captivated. Paul, please carry on.
Anyway, Mr. Jobs in 1996, when he was at Pixar, he said, the storyteller, now you might think this is going to be a thing about how to tell stories. No, it's not. I'm going to suggest to you that every single one of us, bookkeepers, doesn't matter. We are not just storytellers, we're actually story creators. And I'll tell you more about why that is in just a minute. Well, think about what bookkeepers are doing. They're helping businesses run better businesses. In other words, they're helping businesses create a better story, right? That's what's actually happening. So anyway, Jobs, he says, the storyteller sets it's very important you listen to this. The storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to come. Now, if you run through that in your head again and listen to the last 7 words, particularly this time, the storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda, here they come, for an entire generation yet to come. Now, I've got a lump in my throat saying that, by the way, because the moment that you get that, you realize that it's not about you. It's about something much bigger than you. And of course, bookkeepers, in my view, are just an extraordinary example of that. I mentioned to you that I spent a lot of my life, and still do, working with accountants and stuff, and they honored me in all sorts of ways. But I remember going to this conference once, and it was the Australian Bookkeepers Conference. And they said, they hired me, and they said, we've got a few of our members that would like to talk to you tonight before the session in the morning. And so I said, okay. So sat around, and I was just captivated. And I want to explain why I was captivated. Whenever I was talking with accountants, that it was always that the bookkeeper was kind of like the lower part of the plot, if that makes sense. And I'm sure you've come across that. And yet what I heard from these bookkeepers was something that accountants just don't do, which is you talk to your clients on a regular basis, and you talk with them about, the accountant sort of said, well, I'm going to see my client once a year. Well, no one in bookkeeping is you're going to do it at least every month and probably every week. And you're going to be showing them, all of the new things. You're going to be getting into extraordinary things which are now able to be done, and showing them how to do it so that their business grows and as a result, their family and all that kind of stuff. So there you go. That's why I'm really thrilled to be with you. I hope that makes sense. That's the longest introduction you've ever seen.
It was really fascinating to hear about your background, and I didn't realize how much of a financial background you had either. So it's very interesting to hear your view on the value of the bookkeeper, because that's so much of what we're doing all the time is talking about making sure that bookkeepers understand the value of what they do, and that actually is quite a nice connection to the reason we got involved with B1G1, because we realized, and I don't know if you know this about us, but what Jo and I realized is when we looked back, and we did some really deep work this year on our purpose and why we're here and how this is bigger than us. And we were talking, we were away on a trip, and we spent like 4 days talking about why did we do this. And we went back and back and back to like our own childhoods in the 80s, and because we're not 21 either. And my mum was a single mum. Jo's mum and dad were entrepreneurial, and the sort of differences that they had were kind of the same, in terms of it was very difficult, as my mum was a sort of stay-at-home mum with 2 children, mental health challenges, but also trying to do part-time jobs when she could around children. And it was impossible to make work. And we were fine, but I think in like today's world, we would have been on free school meals, and we were in a sort of benefit system. we're very fortunate that in this country, or in the UK, we are supported. However you feel about that, there's a baseline, isn't there?
No, I'm still okay.
And we realised that today, looking at our community today, and the people that we're supporting today with the business skills to charge properly for bookkeeping, to help them understand the value of what they do and build the confidence.
I'm going to talk more about that. About the oh my goodness! Keep going.
Like the sort of poverty trap that my mum found herself in the 80s, where she did every work from home job there was. She sold Avon, she hosted language school students, like she did all the things we'd think of as side hustles today. And then we see people become bookkeepers today because it isn't usually a first choice profession. People do it because they're like, well, this is something I can do at home around my children. And you've seen, I'm here on my own with my children. So I'm working around the kids. And I'm very fortunate that Jo and I have created a situation that is possible to do that. But I can only do that because I have the business skills to understand what has to be automated and what I do, and how I trade my time, or how I monetize what I can do. So we've realized that bookkeepers are still stuck in the trap that our parents were stuck in the 80s, and it hasn't changed. So we realized that there's so much we need to do to help basically children in poverty by helping their parents, and that's the next generation part of this. So what we do is we try and build into our business opportunities to support some projects in the UK. Mainly your projects are overseas. There are things that we can do where we can impact. We can give bookkeeping skills courses or business courses that keep families together and give them that baseline of security. And it feels so important to be able to do that, doesn't it, Jo?
It does. And the thing was, we were really questioned on our purpose. I thought my purpose was to have a big impact and change the economy by helping bookkeepers help their clients to be better business owners and change the economy. And this guy said to me, I don't believe you. He said, that's not why you're doing this. He said, it sounds very nice, but it's not why you're doing it.
No, you're doing it for the money, right?
I was like, really? That's what I really thought I was doing it. And then when I got back to the fact that, my parents were entrepreneurial, self-employed. My dad was always going to see a man about a dog. And I always thought I was going to get a dog. It was never happened. But he was as we'd call a Dell boy. He was always trying new things, but they didn't know how to run a business. And then it led to divorce. And then it led to, my brother would say we were in poverty. I don't feel like it, because I had a very rich childhood. But we did struggle. But it was because we didn't understand how to make money. My mum had 5 children. She couldn't work full time. She was a barmaid. She did fruit picking. I used to go cobnut picking. I had a job as a babysitter from like the age of 12. And exactly what Zoe said, it's the children, and I'm very lucky and very happy. And actually, I believe it's contributed to my entrepreneurial spirit.
Of course.
But we still hear of people today that work is not working for them, and they're choosing bookkeeping as a side hustle, and therefore not giving it the value that it deserves. They're not pricing their worth, and therefore it's still a race to the bottom. And that's what our job is now, is we're doing that to help and impact the families of entrepreneurs. And thank you to your B1G1 has enabled us to do this in a way, because we are juggling. It's given us a platform to be able to do that with ease, we're able to go, right, let's go and give. And it's a really fantastic model, which I'd love to hear more about, so that people in our community can understand it more, because it's quite new and relative to us. Zoe came across it. I knew I'd heard your name before. It's really strange. When you were booked on for the podcast, I was like, I'm sure this guy, I've seen him everywhere in the accounting space. It can't be the same Matt. I assumed I'd got it wrong. But now listening to you, I'm like, oh my goodness, you are the Paul Dunn that I've heard about for years.
Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing. And oh, wow. And by the way, just to illustrate this, I'm not sure, but do let me know. And I know you'll be able to do that, because let me do this just to, well, first of all, let me just talk about some of the issues that you've raised. And one of the most important ones is that we still think that our value to other people is based on the inputs, like it's based on the time, it's based on, all of these things. If there was one overriding message that I could share tonight, it's this, that almost all of us, and I would include me in this too, because it's a common thing, almost all of us simply do not understand the value that we bring. We don't, right? And what we need to do, as far as the charging is concerned, is charge based on the value, the impact that's being created. And of course, the only way we can do that is, instead of just going in and saying, well, this is what I do, right? Take it or leave it, is just using the power of questions to find out what actually happens when we do the work that we do. And simply ask a question. Well, when we would do it, given that we're to do that for you, John and Sally, tell me something about the impact that would have on your business. Well, it was, oh, really? And so now they've got a benchmark. Does that make sense? It's and of course you can go much further than I've gone here, as you well know. And then I think too, I was going to say two things. What was I going to say? This could be difficult to do, but let's give it a try anyway. And this will be the first time I've done this on a podcast. Okay, if we were just on a Zoom meeting now, I would do it, and you'd understand why it would be so easy. I would put up a QR code, and I would show people this QR code, and I would say, when you click that, you can go and select. You could select a project that it could be that you're giving 5 days of access to game-changing education to children in need. It could be that you're giving access to water, because there are still 730 million people who don't have them. Water. It could be, as you know, there are 452 projects there, all of them verified. And interestingly, as you well know, because of the thing in B1G1, you can actually start from just 1 cent. You can give just from 1 cent. It's amazing. And excuse me. And so here's what I want to do. Let's note the time. It's your time is Zoe, you're in some far off land, so we're not sure about you. But in the United Kingdom, Jo, I think right now it's 1:24. Am I right?
That's correct. Okay. Yeah, 1:24.
So for those of you that are at this time on the podcast, and you might want to, or this part of the podcast, let's do it this way: drop a note to Jo or to Zoe, and let them know you're there, and let them know you're listening to this particular piece. And they will count you there. And then for every one of you that does that, we will make sure, excuse me, that 5 kids get access to life-saving water. So, and is that okay? And
yeah.
And that illustrates exactly what you can do. You can add things, or you can say, when you're presenting your invoice or whatever, which hopefully they pay in advance, by the way, you just put a little bit on the bottom which says, by the way, it's been great working with you for this past month, and as a result of this, and as a result of you paying your invoice on time, this happened, whatever this is, from these 452 projects. And all of a sudden, other people start to get the message, Zoe, that you were talking about now, or just a minute ago, right? That it's not about us, it's about creating something even bigger. You weren't there, but because you had other things going on. But a couple of weeks ago, we were in London, in Soho, actually, and that, I shouldn't probably say we were in Soho, but it was a nice place. It was, what was it called? Oh, it was called Work.Life. And brilliant place. And we had a meeting with many of our UK members. And as you know, when we talk about B1G1, we frequently say things like, It's all about the power of small, tiny things. Excuse me, tiny things making, huge differences. And Masami was speaking, and it was the first time I heard it come out of her mouth. And she was talking about sustainability, and she said, for sustainability to work, just get the sense of this. So she's coming into this for the power of small, and then she says, for sustainability to work, we have to elevate everybody. It's not enough just to do it ourselves. We've got to elevate everybody. And then she said this, how about this? She said, and so the power of small becomes the power of all, which is just lovely.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the sort of extra power that you're bringing, because this wonderful community that you're cultivating, you're serving, imagine what we can do together. And does that make sense? Now you make sure you let me. You make sure you let me know, right? And then we'll put something on your site so that we can say what happened. Do you guys know you have? If you're listening to this podcast right now, by the way, you are operating in somewhat of a vacuum, because you cannot see what I can see right now, which is two wonderful smiles. So.
Oh, so lovely. Honestly, Paul, it's the thing is, we're giving, and then in return we receive, in the fact that it feels so good to have that impact, doesn't it? It feels really good, and it always feels bigger than us. The purpose is bigger than us. And I mean, we've dotted things around to be able to, and we learned this by being on Daniel Priestley's KPI course, because we were part of that. And every time we completed a piece of work, it was like, well done. If you send us feedback, we're going to give something. We're like, how does he do that? Yeah, how's he doing that? We want to do that. That feels so good. And we spoke about this the other week, that a lot of the things that we do are not things that we talk about, because we're doing it for purposes. If people come to us and they're struggling, we do things behind the scenes all the time. But what we like about this is that it's so people can go and check it out. It's on our website. You can see the impact.
It is too. It is.
And it feels really, really good. And also it starts questions. People say, how are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And it gives us an opportunity to just talk about impact, which, when we start a business, our initial impact is very much focused on usually keeping a roof over our heads. It's usually on putting food on the table, and it feels like it's the bubble, that very immediate family or self impact. And it feels quite a privilege to get to the point where actually it doesn't need, we're having bigger impacts on people that we don't know. But what I love about B1G1 is, like you said, you can start so small. So actually, this doesn't have to be something that you create these impacts later on down the line. You can start from day one, which is just so powerful.
Isn't it just? Yeah. What's that thing about, someday someday when I'm successful, I'll, whatever. But we tend not to get to that. And what's interesting is too, I like, that very much the perspective that you're creating in the community. It is such an important one. I'm just wondering, this might be an interesting way of thinking about it. When I started speaking, which is sort of like before you were born, quite seriously. No, this guy who was mentoring me at the time, his name is Ron Tacky. Ron said to me, "Do you ever get butterflies?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I do." And he said, "That's great." He said, "The secret is to get the butterflies flying in formation." He said, "That's the secret." So I said, "Oh, how do you do that?" He said, "Well, you have like a ritual. You have something that you say." So from way back that time until 5 years ago, whenever I was being introduced at an event, the person would be saying, here comes Paul, kind of thing. I would be at the far left-hand side, as in the audience, or at the back of the audience, and I would find something reflective, like it could be a spoon, or it could be, there's a window that I'm looking into, and I would say 2 words, and the words that I would say are these: for them, for them, for them, for them. Because, now stay tuned, because that's not what I say now. For them, for them, for them. Because when I got on stage, I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about them. And then one day, I won't go through what happened, but it happened here in Singapore. And I was watching, it was a rainy afternoon, and I was watching a program. It was all about diversity and how we make judgments on people that we don't know, and all of that kind of stuff. And from that day forth, I remember that afternoon I was flying to Bali to do a session in Bali the next day, and that was when I decided to change it. So what I do now, and in fact, before I got on this podcast, right, I didn't say for them, for them, for them. What I said was, for us, for us, for us, for us. Does that make sense? And do you get it? So, yeah. and it's like everybody's together in making this thing happen.
I love that. Yeah. Isn't it funny how I've never thought of the fact that word, that one word, because then you're including yourself. So then it's not coming from a point of difference.
That's right. Oh, I think exactly. I mean, because of what everyone on this podcast does with numbers and all of that kind of stuff, we tend to think numbers are important, and obviously, numbers are. But I like what my friend Simon Sinek said. The guy who does start with Y and all of that sort of stuff. And anyway, Simon said this. He said, "Purpose is never about the numbers. It's never about the economy. It's never economics. Purpose is always human." And I love that. Purpose is human. So when you start to put all that together, you have a totally different way of thinking about it. Now, is the customer important? Of course, the customer is important. And is the customer always right? No, sometimes they're wrong. but when we approach it as this is for us, right, the thing that we don't do is devalue ourselves. And what frequently happens is we think the key to this is to devalue ourselves, rather than the key to this is to add extraordinary value, which they couldn't do anyway, to the people that we're serving, right? And the moment you flip it around and have that kind of thing going for you, it's really, and it's also interesting. I mean, some of the tools that we have today, and I'm sure that the people listening to us now use, it's amazing. I mean, I can remember, as I'm sure you can, the days of the fax machine and all of that. By the way, I reckon one of the most courageous business decisions of all time was the first guy who bought a fax machine. I mean, who's he going to talk to?
Do you know what? You want to know something funny? My husband actually bought a fax machine recently, and
no kidding.
I'm not even joking.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
Part of a project, and I'm like, who are you going to we were trying to make
there
the fax
you go, same thing.
No one's message because no one else has a fax machine.
Exactly. So these days, we've got that's such a good. I didn't know. Oh my God, that's amazing. So now we've got these amazing tools. I'm a kind of a tech freak, and I oh my God, how did they do that? How did they do that? How did they do that? That sort of thing. And so what's actually happening is, and this is the really interesting thing, right? So years ago, we were told, oh, remind me to talk about quotes, right? Remind me to talk about quotes, okay? Remind me to talk about that. Because you were talking about words and saying, words are important. Then I flipped it to numbers are. But the crucial thing is that words are. So, for example, one of the things that I talk about with B1G1 members is that what actually happens when you're part of B1G1 is that you go from standard, meaning, like everybody else, sea of sameness, all that, from standard to stand out because you stand for something, right? And that's a very interesting sort of word shift, if you get what I'm saying. And so when you think about how everything started, way back when in 1949, when someone said, "Oh, we should, have timesheets and keep the time and all that sort of stuff," then guess what? If you're doing that, it's crazy because everything's happening so fast, right? So what do you want to do? You want to say, it's a fraction of a cent or something. And so we have to very quickly get off that bandwagon. And you probably know I've written several books about doing that. And the way you do it is just realize that it's not about the inputs, it's about the outcomes. It is about the outcomes. And that outcome could be, you've talked about it, that the outcome could be that, that person who you just served get to see his kids tonight. How? Because they're using stuff that you're doing. There's all sorts of things. And how do you put value on that? Well, it's extraordinary. Anyway, let me come back to the words. I'm sure that many of us here tonight, because it is tonight my time, but anyway, it's that we do these things called quotes, or sometimes we call them proposals. But let me just say, it's just very simple. I didn't think I would be talking about this tonight, but anyway. But just suppose, instead of saying, here's the quote, or here's the proposal, or whatever it is, why don't we just call it something different? Why don't we call it the plan? So we say, here's the plan. Look at Zoe's face.
We saw the penny drop, didn't we then? We saw the penny drop.
You know what, though? What I also think is, and a few people have said this to us lately, there needs to be a different word for bookkeeper, because there's something about the word for bookkeeper that isn't working anymore. In terms of what we do.
Definitely don't keep books anymore, do we?
No, you don't.
We do.
That's exactly right. There does need to be. We should have a competition, let's do that. I'll find something wonderful to give someone on the who's on the podcast who comes up with the best word for the profession. Is that okay? And you'll keep me in touch and you'll let me know who it is, and you can choose. I don't want to be in the judging panel. You can choose.
Okay. Drop us an email, hello@sixfigurebookkeeper.com. We will pass it on to Paul.
Okay. And then whoever it is will find something really, really, really nice to do as a result. And by the way, what an incredible service that would be. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, back to you.
Oh, do you know what? We've been talking about how the numbers are important. Obviously, the numbers are important to us because we are numbers people. And what we love about working with B1G1 is that we can track the impact. And that from an integrity point of view, that's really important to set, because we decided to make a massive pledge, because we were like, well, if we say we're going to do this, we're going to flipping well try our best to do it. And we said we will try and impact 1 million children in poverty through the work that we do. And
wow. Just pause for a minute. Just pause for a minute and say it again. And let's make sure everybody on the podcast hears what you said. Say it again.
We're on a mission to positively impact 1 million children in poverty by helping their parents run better businesses.
Wow. That's extraordinary, isn't it? That is just, I mean, that's more than lump in the throat, And notice, by the way, something, that typically when we're talking about, we as you know, we don't use this word, but when people sort of they talk about donating something, right? And it's like, oh, we just gave $100 or £100 or $1,000, but you didn't say that. You see what you did. You talked about the outcome. Right, we're on a mission to help 1 million kids come. Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing. Really, really cool. Now, you were going somewhere and I interrupted you, so my apologies. I'll stop.
Well, I was going to ask you to talk to us about B1G1 and the projects and how this looks for somebody who would want to work with you. Because I suppose I didn't really understand your connections to Australia. So when we can choose the projects, and so from our point of view, people work with us through our programs, and then at various points in the program, we invite people to make a donation. In fact, it's automated now. So if somebody checks out and joins our Bookkeepers Collective, you can
automate it. Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. So we can do that, and then we can share those statistics through our website, so people can see at any time how much impact we've made and what that number is towards the million. But we knew it was important to have to track that, because people need to see, and we need to be able to measure it. So that's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, very much.
And then and when I was looking into it, and I was thinking, okay, well, who's supporting these projects? Where's the work happening, and what can I see? Because obviously, then I'm, you know what we're all like. We're all like, make sure we understand everything, and is the money going to the right place and everything? Because you hear about, there's lots of times you can donate to charity, but then a lot of it isn't going directly
to go there,
the cause, and that's why this is brilliant for us. But I didn't really understand who was running the project, how you select the projects that you support, and I'd love to know more about that, Paul.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a good point. It's a really crucial thing that when we started this in 2007, we realized that this was so important. What we do, projects that want to become a part of B1G1, they can't just become a part of B1G1. They have to go through, and it's quite expensive for us to do this, but they have to go through a 12-week process where we audit them, we look at so much stuff, it's amazing, and we actually look back over the last 3 years, and we review things that people may or may not have said about them. It's a very detailed thing. And then if that works, then we submit that to the independent board of B1G1, and it is independent. I can't say to the board, "Oh, I just saw this wonderful project, I think it should be." No, it doesn't work. They've got to go through this process, and so then the board decides, well, this particular project needs to do a little more work on this or whatever, or yes, they're in. But what's interesting, the numbers are really interesting actually. And they've been this almost since day one for some reason. The board rejects, and they don't say, get lost. They say you can't be a part of B1G1 because of this, so fix that. And they reject somewhere between 7 and 9 out of 10 every quarter. That's huge, right? Now, I wish that it wasn't like that. I wish it was everybody, right? But if it was everybody, then you couldn't have the trust of knowing that everything. So when you see a B1G1 project, it does what it says on the tin. That's the important thing, and you can feel really, really good about that. And then the other thing, of course, as you said earlier on, is that part of the magic is, and this is where Masami was so insightful, was to say to the projects, we need you to break this down into very tiny units, so that we can say, for 1 cent you can do this and that, or whatever, whatever the number is. And why would we do that? Well, I remember we were working with a particular project, which is an interesting one, in Bali actually, and they've given, get this, they have given 43,000 Balinese their site. Turns out that what happens in Bali is people have a lot of cataracts, right? And when they have cataracts, of course, they can't work, they can't do that, so that impacts the family. So it used to be that on their website, and in fact, it's still on their website, where they would say this, donate, and give us $60, $60 because that gives the operation. So we said to them, well, someone in B1G1 isn't going to do that because whatever they're giving it against might not be $60. It might just be someone joined on the website. Someone just got on a website. It might just be we had a great meeting or whatever. So it's not going to $60. It's not going to happen. So we know, and for example, I can tell you right now that the sutures in the eyes that they do, I can tell you they're 17 cents. And so that breaks it down. Does that make sense? In exactly the same way, when we think about water, we look at the number of people that are benefiting from the water. When we think about the young girls, for example, in Kenya, it's interesting. It's you just because they're young girls, they're going through puberty and all that kind of stuff. And guess what happens? They don't go to school for at least 1 week out of 4. They don't. And so then what happens? Well, then what happens is, they can't, all of that sort of stuff. And just to fix that is like a couple of cents. That's all it is. A couple of cents. And that is seriously changing lives, right? As you could imagine. And then we have, I remember how about this one? In Kenya, there's years ago, not that many years ago, about 10 years ago, there was this huge issue with AIDS. And there's this woman, her name is Consolata, who runs one of the projects in Kenya. And she got a phone call, and the phone call said, Consolata, you are now responsible for 9,000 orphans. Now, what do you do? Seriously, what would you do if you got that phone call? Right? And you probably would know that orphanages are not the best place for kids. Right? You would probably know that. So what she did was just amazing. She figured that the grandparents of the kids needed to play a part in this, and then what she did, she got this. She got a fast-growing Kenyan shrub, and she crossed it with a mango tree, a normal mango tree, and that's not what she did first up, but like this, because she's put the kids with the grandparents, and she's made sure, excuse me, that the grandparents are not seeing them as liabilities, but they're seeing them as assets. And then what she does, she figures this tree thing, and so now she's got all these mango trees, which now, instead of taking 8 years to grow, take 2 years to grow, and they just give amazing fruit. And so then they sell the shrub, the little things, whatever you call it, shrubs, excuse me, to the grandparents for like about $1.50 or something, and they get 10 of them, and then they get all the benefits of that. Guess what happens? So then what happens is they can sell the mangoes and have food on the table and everything else, and they can pay for 2 kids to go for school for a year, just from the mangoes. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. And there are so many other cool. All of the projects in B1G1 have that. Like, for example, in Cambodia, there's. Do you know, if you're a teenager, this is kind of a bit iffy, but let me tell you the story anyway. In Cambodia, the kids, if you are a teenage kid, a boy, and you happen to take an egg from the school tuck shop or something, you will go to prison, and there are no such things as teenage prisons. So they're in adult prison. So you can imagine, all the bad stuff that goes on. And so there's this project there. It's really cool. It's called This Life Cambodia. And they go into the prisons. They work with these kids. They give them skills to run motorbike shops and all of that kind of stuff and everything else. And then when they come out, it's very easy for them. But all of the people in the project, but they actually went to the government, and the Cambodian government is not exactly the most friendliest government, I would imagine. So they went to them and said, this sucks. You should not be doing that. And just this year, after all of that pressure, it's changing. Or it's like the kids in Australia, the indigenous kids. There was all this stuff with petrol sniffing. And so the people who run this particular project in Australia, it's called .com Mob. And what they did, they actually went, I mean, talk about courage. They went to the BP and Shell, meaning the petrol suppliers, and they said, guys, why don't you get sensible and make petrol that kids can't sniff? And believe it or not, they did. And all of a sudden what happened is the level of petrol sniffing goes down by 92%. And so now and then, by the way, the kids were just standing around on the street corner saying, what are we going to do? And so now they've got this program where they teach them how to, the kids already know, how to do Aboriginal art kind of thing. But now what they do is they teach them how to run that in the gig economy. So it doesn't matter where they are. They might be, in the wilderness somewhere, but now they can do all sorts of things. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on. Zoe, thank you for your question in B1G1 that is, we don't talk about it very often, right? And that's perhaps why I spoke about it too much tonight. But anyway, you get the idea that there's a whole lot of great stuff going on, which reminds me, last week, 2 weeks ago, Masami, the founder of B1G1, and by the way, if you go to b1g1.com, if you go there, it's for everybody listening now, go down a couple of things and see if you can find, it's called The Origin Story. It's a 4-minute video. Just watch it. It's like amazing. Anyway, she gets this speaking gig, if I can call it that, I can call it that. She gets engaged, right, to do a speech in Lisbon in Portugal at a place called the Ethical Assembly. And so she's looking at the map and she knows that a couple of days after she does this speech, she and I are going to be, 5 days after, she and I are going to be speaking in London. So she thinks to herself, well, what am I going to do in this 5-day period? Let me tell you what she did. She just looked on the map from Lisbon. You can do this yourself, and just go northeast, and you come to a country called Ukraine. And we have 3 projects in Ukraine. So Masami says, I'm going to go to Ukraine. But she didn't just say, I'm going to go to Ukraine. It turns out that the week before that, we were working with our Australian members, and Masami, as you know, Japanese are good at origami. The kids learn this thing. And there's this very special thing that they learn to fold. It's called a crane, as in like a bird, okay? And it's an important thing in Japanese culture. So if, for example, one of us was sick, then the others would all gather around and we would make 1,000 of these origami cranes and we would put them by your bedside. We would thread them and put them by your bedside because they're a symbol of peace and goodwill. If you go to the Hiroshima or Nagasaki museums, you'll see thousands of these things that come in every day. Anyway, so she says, okay, so we're going to be working in Australia with our members. So wouldn't it be great if we taught them how to fold origami cranes? Jo, I never thought I would sit in a room of business people that are learning all these, and they're actually folding these cranes. And seriously, and so when she left to go to Lisbon, she had 850 of these cranes, and she'd strung them all together. And then she got together with the kids in Ukraine, and there's a lot of that's very sad, by the way, which I won't go into. But when you get into the depth of the stories, there's some really uplifting thing there, particularly, by the way, about the strength of women. Particularly, and she was meeting with these 4 women who all of a sudden one day when the bombs started to drop, the next day there's a stream of people coming into their tiny little town. And so these women, how about this? This is such the women get together. One of these women happens to own a cafe, and so these 4 women get together and say, what are we going to do? We're going to have these. And they said, we're just going to make meals. And in 5 months, these 4 women made 500,000 meals for these kids. And so have a listen to this. So Masami's talking with these women, and she says, well, how did you do that? How did you make it all happen? What things did you do? And the women said, oh, this is so powerful. The women said, we just had to do it because we didn't have time to do anything else. Think about that. Think about that. Because sometimes what do? We get stuck in that sort of thinking thing, don't we? You know, should I, shouldn't I? Should I? And all of a sudden, if you had, you know, that many kids, you don't have time. I mean, you've got to do it. And maybe that's a metaphor for some of the things that are going on with, you know, in people's lives, that you look at it and you go, you know what? I don't have time anymore. Boom. I can do this. I can be supported. And I know you would do that. You just meeting you now, I mean, I know that you would not just radiate that joy and that support, but yeah, just actually deliver it. I know. And of course, I see the website and I see all the great things you do with B1G1. So, yeah, it's I'm getting a lump in my throat talking with you guys.
Oh, cool. Well, do you know what, that I think that comes back so nicely to what you said about how this isn't something that we need to wait to do when we've achieved the target we've got in our minds, and that, you know, it doesn't have to be a massive financial investment. This is about just saying, how do I build, like, the thing that really, the project we spend, like, we invest a lot in supporting. Couldn't believe it when I was reading, you know, you obviously go through and you select the projects, and there's I think it's in Cambodia, and lots of the children in orphanages actually have living parents, but they can't be looked after for financial reasons. I cannot believe that a family like that. It just is inconceivable to me that I wouldn't do everything I can to keep my children with me. But if you have no choice, you know, some people are in that situation where there's absolutely no choice, and it broke my heart. So, you know, and that being able to just support those families, keep people together, support the children going to school, whatever it takes, is really powerful. And it's so simple for us to be able to make that.
It's interesting, isn't it? That's such a good story, Zoe. And when it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, these podcasts like this, and again, wherever you are listening to this, thank you very much for being here. Podcasts like this is actually, you know, sometimes we're going to be talking about wonderful new products and wonderful new apps and all of that sort of stuff and everything. But when it's all boiled down, it's not about the apps and all that kind of stuff. It's just about us, really. It really is. It's about, you know, our willingness to actually leave a legacy that is not about us, right? Because so and by doing that, we're not, by being a part of B1G1, sure, we're going to leave a really interesting legacy of contribution, but there's something else that B1G1 sort of quote unquote forces you to do. And you spoke about it a minute ago when you talked about your website. I like alliteration, you know, where you string words together a particular way. So hence, you know, standard to stand out because you stand for. But if you think of legacy, most people think, frequently too late, that they're going to leave one, right? So leave a legacy. But we don't realize that we don't have a choice. We are actually going to leave one. The only choice is, what's it look like? Right? Is it one of consumption or is it one of contribution? And then when you start to play with the leave a legacy line, you get an entirely different outcome. You say, oh, okay, well, maybe then, with the help of Zoe and Jo, that maybe what I can do now is actually live that legacy every day. And maybe, again, what I can do with the help of you two is I can leverage that legacy. That is, other people can see, you know, what's actually happening. And those other people go, oh, that would be kind of cool for us, right, as well. And then, of course, you bring it together again, because that's how you really leave a legacy. And, who do you do that for? Well, certainly not for you, but for, you know, the generation yet to come. That's what it's about. That's why it's so nice to spend. Gosh, I've enjoyed my time with you.
Oh, we have as well. Thank you so much, Paul, for today. Honestly, it's been so lovely. I haven't cried on this podcast for a very long time, and I've definitely had a few lumps in my throat and definitely wet eyes. But all, you know, I think it's been lovely for us to reflect on what we're doing. And I love that piece about living your legacy. That has really hit home. And we can start doing that today. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming. If anybody wants to find out more about you, where could they connect with you?
Oh,
Paul?
just jump up on b1g1.com and as I said, have a look at that legacy story. Meet Masami. She's just amazing. You know, and just connect. I like what Brene Brown said about connection. She said, connection is why we're here, right? It's what brings meaning and purpose to our life. And so if you think about that for a minute, you know, when you get meaning and purpose, you have extra connection. And when you have connection, you have meaning and purpose. So it's this lovely, lovely circle, right? And you also get that it's for us, right? It's for us. So I've had a ball with you. I really have.
Thank you so much. It's been really lovely to speak to you, and thank you everyone who's tuned in. I'm actually going to go through and have a little count up later of who was listening.
Oh yes, yeah, we'll do that. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much. Thanks everybody, and we'll be back next week for another episode of the Bookkeepers Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you everybody, and thank you too. Bye. Bye.